She was paid to pretend to be his wife for a business deal, but neither of them expected to fall in love for real. Will their love survive when the truth comes out? Watch the full story unfold in this deeply emotional cinematic romance. Before we begin the story, where are you watching from? Comment below and enjoy. Juliana Carter stood outside the towering glass doors of Kingsley Enterprises, trying not to let her nerves show. Her reflection stared back at her, long, curly auburn hair cascading down her shoulders, smooth cocoa brown skin glowing under the late morning sun, and eyes the color of wet hazelnuts. She was beautiful in a quiet, understated way, dressed in a vintage olive green coat, cinched at the waist, concealing the faded floral dress beneath. A small black notebook was clutched to her chest. She'd been a struggling actress for years, waiting tables by night and chasing casting calls by day. But this meeting? This could change everything. Inside, Damien Kingsley stood at his office window, watching the city move below. Tall, commanding, and effortlessly striking, Damien was the kind of man who drew attention without saying a word. His piercing, steel blue eyes were a stark contrast against his deep, caramel-toned skin. His tailored charcoal suit hugged his athletic frame like it was designed just for him. Because it had been. At 34, he was the youngest CEO in the company's history, known as much for his brilliance as his cold, ruthless demeanor. But today, his mind was elsewhere. When Juliana was ushered in, she half expected to be intimidated, but Damien's gaze didn't hold cruelty, it held calculation. "I need a wife," he said simply, his voice as smooth as aged whiskey. "For appearances. Just for 6 months, no strings. You'll be paid handsomely." Juliana blinked. "Excuse me?" "Marry me, pretend, play the role, help me close the biggest business deal of my life." Her heart skipped. This wasn't an audition. It was something bigger, dangerous. But something in his eyes told her it was real. And somehow she said the one word that would change everything. "Okay." The following morning, Juliana found herself sitting at a sleek obsidian table in Damien Kingsley's private office. The room was quiet, save for the gentle hum of the city outside and the distant clicking of a wall clock. The walls were lined with minimalist art, and shelves held more awards than books. Damien sat across from her, the very picture of calm authority, with his fingers laced together on the desk. Between them lay a crisp, 20-page contract. Juliana glanced at it, then back at Damien. He looked like he hadn't slept, but it only added to the sharp edges of his already handsome features. There was a tired heaviness in his eyes, but his voice remained smooth as he spoke. "Everything is outlined here. 6 months, public appearances, a believable relationship. You'll move into my home, attend events, smile for the cameras. In exchange, you'll be paid a monthly fee." A generous one. Juliana reached for the contract with slightly trembling fingers. Her mind was spinning. Who offers a woman a fake marriage just like that? And yet, this wasn't the craziest thing she'd done to keep her dreams alive. She scanned the document, details about the role, boundaries, expectations. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous, just surreal. Damien leaned back in his chair. "I need this to close, a merger with a conservative billionaire who values family. He won't seal the deal if I'm single. You'd be saving my business." Juliana looked up at him. "And why me?" Damien's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Because you don't seem like the type to fall in love with a man like me." Juliana hesitated, her pen hovering over the signature line. She signed. And so, the lie began. Juliana stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of Damien's penthouse suite, her eyes sweeping over the skyline as dusk began to fall. The apartment was pristine, all sleek lines, cool tones, and expensive silence. Every detail screamed wealth, but there was no warmth, just like its owner. She turned when she heard his footsteps behind her. Damien walked in carrying a small velvet box. He didn't smile, didn't say a word. He simply opened it and held it out to her. Nestled inside was a diamond ring so large and brilliant that it caught the light and fractured it into rainbows across the room. "Wear this at all times when we're in public," he said flatly. "The press will be watching." Juliana took the ring, carefully, the cold metal pressing into her palm. It felt heavier than it looked. She slid it onto her finger, and for the first time, the gravity of what she'd agreed to began to settle in her bones. Damien turned toward the bar and poured himself a drink. "No alcohol for you during appearances. I'll have a stylist drop by tomorrow to update your wardrobe. You'll be expected to attend 3 events this week, and we'll start rehearsing our backstory tomorrow morning. How we met, how I proposed, everything." She watched him, trying to understand the man beneath the flawless surface. He was all control, efficiency, and distance. It was clear he'd done this before, not the fake marriage, but building walls, tall, impenetrable walls. "And what happens if people suspect something?" Juliana asked. "Then you act harder, better. We don't fail, we don't get caught." Juliana turned back toward the window, the city lights flickering below. This wasn't a game anymore. It was a performance, with everything on the line. Juliana sat across from Damien at the long marble dining table, a steaming mug of coffee cupped between her hands. She wore a cream cashmere sweater freshly delivered by Damien's stylist and tailored jeans that fit her like they were made for her. Beside her, a binder lay open, filled with photographs, timelines, and bullet-pointed facts about their so-called love story. Damien pointed to a photo of them recently taken where he was guiding her out of a building with his hand gently placed on the small of her back. The press had already started speculating. That was from yesterday, our first official public sighting. The narrative is simple. We met at a charity gala 3 months ago, sparks flew. I proposed 2 weeks ago during a weekend in Paris. Juliana raised an eyebrow. Paris? Really? He shrugged. Big gestures make big headlines. They moved through the binder. Favorite songs, shared memories, fake arguments, their first date. It was thorough. Damien had clearly planned every second of this performance. But what caught Juliana off guard wasn't the depth of the story, it was how easy it was to imagine herself actually being a part of it. His taste, his ambition, his quiet intensity, it was all oddly magnetic. During a break, Juliana wandered toward the open bookshelves lining his living room. Among the business manuals and finance books, she found a collection of poetry. Neruda, Rumi, Langston Hughes. She glanced back at Damien. Didn't peg you as the poetic type. Damien looked up, his expression unreadable. A flicker of vulnerability passed through his eyes before he answered. There's more to me than you think. Juliana smiled faintly, something shifting inside her. And maybe, she thought, there was more to this arrangement than either of them expected. Juliana adjusted the diamond studs in her ears, then turned to face herself in the full-length mirror. The stylist had outdone herself. Her floor-length sapphire blue gown hugged her figure perfectly, with an elegant slit that whispered luxury and confidence. Her makeup was soft but radiant, and her curls were swept to one side, cascading over her shoulder like a waterfall. She looked like the kind of woman who belonged on the arm of a billionaire. When Damien walked into the room, he paused. "You clean up well," he said, voice lower than usual. "So do you," she replied, her eyes grazing the sharp lines of his tuxedo. He looked devastatingly handsome, hair neatly styled, jaw clean-shaven, and his usual cool air of control settled firmly in place. Their limousine arrived moments later, and soon they were stepping out onto the red carpet at the annual Monarch Foundation Gala, one of the most exclusive events in the city. Cameras flashed like lightning, reporters shouted Damien's name, all eyes turned to them, the mystery woman on his arm, and the ring on her finger. Juliana smiled, lifting her chin with quiet confidence. Damien's hand rested at the small of her back, firm and protective. "Remember," he murmured, "we're in love." She turned to him, playing the part, and gave him a soft smile that felt a little too real. Inside the ballroom, elite guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers. Champagne flowed freely. Business moguls, socialites, and celebrities whispered and stared as Damien introduced her as his fiancé. Everywhere they went, Juliana was charming, poised, believable. But it wasn't just the crowd watching her now. Damien was watching too. And for the first time, he couldn't tell where the act ended and the woman began. The gala had reached its peak. Laughter echoed under the dome ceiling, violins sang softly from the live orchestra, and the glittering crowd moved like clockwork between champagne flutes and whispered deals. But Juliana remained a glowing presence in the room, poised, attentive, effortlessly captivating. Then came the announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join us on the dance floor." Damien looked at her, his expression unreadable, and offered his hand. She hesitated for a moment before taking it. His palm was warm, his grip firm as he led her into the center of the floor. The music shifted to a slow waltz. As his arm slid around her waist and their bodies moved in unison, Juliana was suddenly aware of how close he really was, of how easily their bodies fit together. He smelled of cedarwood and something darker, more dangerous. She tried to keep her gaze steady, but he was looking at her, really looking, and it sent a strange flutter through her chest. "You're surprisingly good at this," Damien murmured. "I used to take lessons, helps with stage work." His lips curved slightly. "So your talents go beyond pretending." She raised an eyebrow. "And yours?" He chuckled quietly, but there was something deeper in his eyes now, something thoughtful. There was a softness in the way he held her, a gentleness that didn't match the ruthless CEO reputation he carried. Then, just as the dance ended, Juliana caught sight of a tall woman in a crimson gown watching them from across the room. Her expression was unreadable, her eyes locked on Damien. "Who's that?" Juliana asked. Damien stiffened. "An ex?" "Juliana." Didn't press further. But her instincts told her that woman wasn't just part of Damien's past. She was about to be part of their future. Juliana kept her eyes on the woman in red even as the music faded. The woman's gaze was cool, calculating, and focused squarely on Damien. She didn't blink, didn't smile, and didn't approach, but her presence said everything. There was history, complicated history. As guests returned to their conversations and the dance floor emptied, Juliana leaned in slightly toward Damien. "She's still watching you." "I know," he replied, jaw tight. "Her name is Celeste Moreau." Juliana repeated the name silently. It sounded like power and danger. Celeste carried herself like a woman who was used to getting what she wanted. She had the kind of striking beauty that didn't beg for attention. It demanded it. Golden skin, high cheekbones, blood-red lips, and a confidence that matched Damien's. She looked like she could ruin lives with a smile. "Was she important to you?" Juliana asked. Damien hesitated. "Once, until she betrayed me." Juliana didn't press for details. But something had clearly cracked behind his calm exterior. His posture was just a bit stiffer now, his voice colder. Later that evening, as they left the gala and slid into the back of the limousine, Damien remained silent. The city lights flickered past, illuminating the tension between them. "You okay?" Juliana asked softly. He looked at her, and for a split second, he seemed to forget himself. His eyes, usually guarded, were raw with something unspoken. "Celeste has a way of resurfacing when she thinks I'm moving on. She doesn't like to be replaced." Juliana gave a dry laugh. "So, I'm your replacement?" "You're not a replacement. You're the only person who doesn't expect anything from me. That makes you different." Juliana looked down at her ring, heavy on her finger. Different, but temporary. Still, for the first time, she wasn't sure she wanted it to stay that way. By morning, the tabloids had exploded. Damien Kingsley engaged. Mystery woman revealed at Monarch Gala. Juliana scrolled through headlines as she sat at the breakfast bar in Damien's penthouse. Her photo was everywhere, walking beside Damien, laughing during the dance, adjusting her hair with the ring catching the light. They looked like a fairy tale couple. The problem was, none of it was real. Damien entered the room, phone pressed to his ear, issuing quiet commands to someone on the other end. Even half-dressed in a crisp white shirt and black trousers, he carried himself like a king. When he ended the call, he glanced at her over his coffee mug. "It worked," he said simply. "My board is thrilled, investors are at ease, the merger talks are moving forward." Juliana nodded, but something about the photo staring back at her from her phone screen made her stomach twist. It looked too perfect, and that perfection, it was beginning to blur the lines. The doorbell rang, followed by the arrival of a delivery. Flowers, dozens of them, roses, lilies, orchids, all addressed to Juliana, some from clients Damien was wooing, some from anonymous well-wishers, but one bouquet stood out. Black roses. No card. Juliana picked them up, puzzled. Damien stiffened when he saw them. "Those aren't from a fan," he muttered. "They're from her, Celeste." Juliana's skin prickled. This was no longer just a fake engagement. It was a game that powerful people were watching and playing. Later, at a photo shoot scheduled by Damien's publicist, Juliana had to smile for cameras and drape her arms around Damien like she belonged there. When the photographer asked them to kiss, she hesitated. But Damien did. He leaned in and kissed her. Slowly. Believably. Too believably. And Juliana's heart betrayed her just a little. That kiss haunted Juliana all night. It had started as a performance, something to please the camera, to sell the illusion. But the moment Damien's lips touched hers, everything shifted. The world faded. His hand had cradled the side of her face gently, his mouth moving over hers with startling tenderness. There was no script for the way her body reacted. No rehearsal could have prepared her for the sudden rush of heat, the trembling in her chest. Back at the penthouse, the air between them was different. Heavy, charged. Neither of them spoke about the kiss, but it lingered. In the way Damien brushed against her shoulder while passing, in the way his gaze lingered a beat too long when she wasn't looking, in the way her breath caught every time he walked into the room. Juliana was in the kitchen the next morning, slicing fruit in one of the silk robes Damien's stylist had left for her. The robe fell just below mid-thigh, revealing more than she realized. Damien entered, still in his usual morning attire. Button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, watch glinting on his wrist. He paused. "You're comfortable here?" he said, voice rougher than usual. She froze. "Am I too comfortable?" No, his eyes didn't leave her. Just, unexpected. Juliana turned back to the counter, trying to calm her racing heart. This wasn't part of the plan. They weren't supposed to feel anything, but her emotions were starting to betray her, blurring the line between act and reality. Later, as she lay in the guest bedroom staring at the ceiling, Juliana realized the most dangerous part of pretending wasn't the lie. It was how easily she was beginning to wish it were true. 2 weeks into the arrangement, everything appeared perfect from the outside. The media was obsessed with them. Magazine covers declared them the city's golden couple. Damien's stock prices rose. Invitations to elite events poured in. And Juliana, she had never felt more seen or more conflicted. She stood on the balcony that overlooked the skyline, arms folded against the morning chill. Damien had already left for a meeting. The silence in the penthouse was louder without him. Her phone buzzed with notifications. More interviews, press requests, photo opportunities. But one message made her heart still. "Unknown number, he's lying to you. Check the past. Celeste never really left." Juliana stared at the message, a chill running through her. She blocked the number, but the seed was planted. She'd pushed her doubts aside before, but now they scratched at the surface. Who was Damien really? And why did Celeste still linger like a ghost haunting their steps? Later that evening, Damien returned. He looked exhausted, tie loosened, frustration written across his face. She waited until after dinner before speaking. "Someone messaged me, says Celeste is still involved in your life?" Damien's face hardened instantly, his jaw clenched, and he turned away, pouring himself a drink before responding. "She's not in any way that matters." "That's not an answer." He looked at her then, eyes sharp. "This was never part of the deal, Juliana. You're here to play a role, not interrogate me." The words stung. She took a breath, steadying herself. "Right, just the role." She left the room quietly, the weight of those 4 words crushing her chest. But in her heart, she knew something had changed. She wasn't playing anymore. And deep down, she didn't think Damien was either. 3 days later, Juliana was still feeling the sting of Damien's words. She kept her distance, playing the role when necessary, smiling for cameras, standing by his side at meetings. But behind closed doors, silence stretched between them like a wall. That evening, Damien announced they'd be hosting a private dinner with an important investor, Charles Delacroix, a French billionaire who prided himself on traditional family values, the kind of man who needed to believe their engagement was real. Juliana was dressed in an elegant burgundy dress, her hair pinned into soft waves, every detail perfectly manicured. She'd learned how to carry herself with grace, how to make eye contact, laugh just enough, and ask all the right questions. But tonight, she felt off balance. Something about the evening felt heavier. Charles arrived with a firm handshake and a keen eye. He was tall, gray-haired, with a presence that filled the room. His wife Sabine joined them, warm and sharp, watching Juliana with quiet curiosity. "You must be the one who tamed the elusive Mr. Kingsley," Sabine said with a smile. Juliana laughed politely. "He makes it easy." Damien glanced at her, just for a second, and something passed between them, a silent tension. A question he didn't ask. Dinner went smoothly until dessert. That was when Charles leaned back in his chair and said casually, "So Juliana, how did he propose? I want to hear it from you." Juliana's stomach flipped. She had memorized the script, but her heart wasn't ready. Still, she smiled and launched into the story they'd agreed upon. Paris, a rooftop dinner, a violinist, Damien down on one knee. But as she spoke, she added a detail that wasn't in the script. And when he looked at me, I believed it. Every word, every promise. Damien's eyes snapped to hers. And in that moment, Juliana wasn't sure if it was a lie anymore. The moment the Delacroix's car disappeared down the driveway, silence fell over the penthouse. Juliana carefully removed her heels at the door, her thoughts spinning. She hadn't meant to stray from the script. The words had just slipped out. Too natural, too close to the truth. Damien closed the front door behind him and turned to face her. His expression was unreadable, but there was something simmering in his gaze. "You added something," he said quietly. She shrugged, feigning innocence. "It made the story more believable. You said you believed every word, every promise. Didn't you?" she asked, her voice low, cautious. Damien stepped closer. For a moment, he looked as though he was about to say something honest, something real, but instead he ran a hand through his hair and walked toward the bar. "This is getting too messy, Juliana. The whole point was to keep things simple." Juliana followed, arms crossed. "You wanted real, you needed convincing, and now that I'm doing it too well, I'm the problem." He poured himself a drink and avoided her eyes. "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" "It was silent." She exhaled sharply, moving past him toward the guest room, her voice trembling but firm. "You can't have it both ways, Damien. You can't ask me to play your wife, share your world, your secrets, your kiss, and then act like I'm just an actress in your play." He turned slowly, setting the glass down. "I kissed you because I wanted to." Juliana froze, in the hallway. "Then say that," she whispered. Damien didn't, and the silence that followed said more than either of them could bear. But from that moment forward, nothing about the arrangement would feel safe again. Juliana didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Damien's voice echoing in her mind. "I kissed you because I wanted to." It had been the closest thing to truth he'd given her since their arrangement began, but as much as she wanted to believe it meant something, she also knew Damien Kingsley never did anything without reason. The next morning she rose early, determined to gain clarity, not from Damien, but from the past he tried to keep hidden. She called an old friend from her acting days, Liam, who now freelanced as a celebrity researcher for a gossip blog. "I need information on Celeste Moreau," she said, "everything, quickly." Liam didn't ask why. He owed her a favor. Hours later, Juliana sat in a small cafe, her phone buzzing with the files Liam had dug up. She scrolled through the information, her heart pounding as details surfaced. Celeste had been engaged to Damien 3 years ago. They were the city's most glamorous couple until the sudden breakup. The public story was that she left him for a Hollywood producer. But the private truth? Celeste had sabotaged one of Damien's biggest business deals by leaking confidential documents to a rival firm, costing him millions and nearly collapsing Kingsley Enterprises. Juliana's breath caught. He wasn't just bitter, he had been betrayed, publicly and privately. And now Celeste was back, circling him like a shark. No wonder he built walls, no wonder he didn't trust her, or himself. That night, when Juliana returned to the penthouse, Damien was waiting in the living room. "You were gone all day," he said, watching her closely. "I needed answers," she replied, holding his gaze. And now that she had them, she didn't just see Damien differently. She saw herself differently too. Juliana stood in the doorway of the penthouse, her coat still clinging to her shoulders, the weight of everything she'd learned pressing into her spine. Damien remained standing across the room, tense, arms folded, eyes shadowed. She walked in slowly, removed her coat, and set her phone on the table. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I know what happened with Celeste." Damien didn't flinch, but the muscle in his jaw twitched. "I suppose you looked it up?" "Yes, and I'm glad I did." He let out a breath and looked away. "It was a long time ago. I've moved on." Juliana stepped closer. "But have you? Because I don't think this fake engagement is just about business. I think it's about protecting yourself from trust, from vulnerability, from ever feeling that kind of betrayal again." Damien finally met her eyes. There was no anger there, just exhaustion and something dangerously close to sadness. "You think you have me all figured out, Juliana?" "No, but I think I'm starting to see you more clearly. You're not as untouchable as you pretend to be." He looked at her for a long moment, then moved to sit on the edge of the couch. For the first time, he looked human, fallible. She sat beside him, close but not too close, The silence between them wasn't heavy this time. It was fragile, honest. "You scare me, Damien," she admitted softly. "Why?" "Because I came here thinking I could control this, that I could act my way through it, but now I don't know what's real anymore." He turned toward her, eyes locked on hers. Neither of them spoke. And in the stillness of that moment, something inside both of them began to break. Not apart, but open. The next morning, everything felt different. Damien didn't bark instructions over breakfast. Juliana didn't keep her distance. They sat across from each other in a quiet rhythm, him reading the paper, her sipping coffee, with a kind of domestic ease that neither one acknowledged aloud. Their routine was shifting. It wasn't just business anymore. It was something gentler, something unspoken. Later, while reviewing plans for an upcoming charity gala, Damien sat on the living room sofa, tie loosened, shirt sleeves rolled up. Juliana joined him with a stack of notes, their knees brushing slightly as they leaned over the papers. "We should tell the story of how we fell in love a little differently," Juliana said, adjusting the binder in her lap. He glanced sideways at her. "How so?" She smiled faintly. "Less perfect, more real." He paused. "What does real sound like?" Juliana tilted her head. "Maybe we met at a charity event. Maybe you were cold and distracted and didn't care about anything but your work, and I made you laugh." Damien's lips curved slightly. "That does sound like you." "And then, slowly, you started letting me in," she continued softly, "piece by piece, until suddenly, you didn't know what scared you more, losing the business deal or losing me." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached up and gently tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering near her cheek. "Just a second too long. I don't remember what's real and what's not anymore," he said. Juliana's heart beat faster. "Neither do I." They didn't kiss, but they didn't have to, because something deeper had begun to stir, something they couldn't rehearse or fake. Not love yet, but the quiet whisper of its arrival. Just as things between Juliana and Damien began to shift, the past found its way back to the surface. It started with an invitation, an exclusive charity gala hosted by none other than Celeste Moreau. The envelope arrived by courier, thick cream cardstock embossed with gold. Damien opened it, read it once, and tossed it on the coffee table without a word. "You not going?" Juliana asked cautiously. He didn't answer immediately. Then, without looking at her, he said, "She knows we're supposed to be there. If we don't show up, it'll look suspicious." Juliana's chest tightened. "And if we go?" He finally met her eyes. "Then we hold the illusion tighter than ever." That evening, she wore a sleek black gown that left her shoulders bare, her makeup smoky and elegant. Damien, in a fitted midnight blue tuxedo, looked every inch the man who owned the room. But Juliana could feel the shift in him the moment they stepped into the ballroom. Celeste stood near the entrance in a floor-length crimson dress, her signature shade. She smiled when she saw them, as if she had been waiting. Juliana tightened her grip on Damien's arm. His body was tense, but his voice was smooth when they greeted Celeste. "You clean up well," Celeste said, her eyes drifting to Juliana, "and you must be the fiancé." Juliana nodded politely. "Juliana Carter, it's a pleasure." Celeste's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure it is." The conversation was brief, but the air between the three of them was sharp as glass. Juliana could feel it. Celeste hadn't returned to win Damien back. She had returned to destroy him. And now, Juliana wasn't just playing a role anymore. She was standing between him and the woman who once broke him. The gala was opulent, crowded with the city's most powerful faces, but Juliana felt like she was walking through a battlefield. Every polite smile felt like a warning. Every raised champagne glass like a signal. Celeste moved through the crowd like a queen, greeting old allies, whispering in ears, planting seeds. But Juliana never let her out of her sight. Damien, ever the master of composure, kept close to Juliana's side. He introduced her proudly, touched her waist when no one was looking, leaned in when she spoke, playing the role with so much precision it was easy to forget he was acting. But Juliana wasn't acting anymore. Her emotions were too real, her heart too invested. When Celeste made her way back to them, Juliana braced herself. "Damien, can I borrow you for a moment?" Celeste asked sweetly. "Just one." Juliana expected Damien to say no. Instead, he surprised her. "Juliana, give us a minute," he said gently. She nodded, lips pressed into a tight line. As the two walked away, she couldn't ignore the sting blooming in her chest. She found herself wandering to the edge of the ballroom, pretending to be interested in the art while her eyes stayed locked on them. Celeste leaned in too close. Damien's face was unreadable. Her hand grazed his lapel. Juliana's stomach twisted. After several minutes, he returned. His jaw was tight, his shoulders squared. "What did she want?" Juliana asked quietly. "To remind me that she still knows how to threaten me," he replied. "She's heard rumors that our engagement is a lie." Juliana's breath caught. "Did you deny it?" "I didn't need to." Damien said, "I kissed you last week, remember?" He looked at her with something deeper than strategy in his eyes. "Let him doubt. I don't." For the first time, Juliana felt both terrified and alive. Because this wasn't just about protecting an image anymore. It was about protecting something she didn't want to lose. Back at the penthouse, the evening air was thick with unspoken tension. Damien tossed his jacket onto the back of a chair, unbuttoned his cuffs, and poured himself a glass of whiskey. Juliana stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the city blink under the night sky. "You should have said no to her," she finally said. He looked up. "I had to hear what she was playing at." "And what is she playing at?" Damien's jaw clenched. "She's trying to dig. She wants proof that this engagement is fake. If she finds anything, she'll use it to collapse the merger, out of spite." Juliana turned toward him. "And what if she finds something?" "She won't," he said, voice low and certain. But Juliana wasn't reassured. She was tired of being a pawn in a war she didn't start, tired of pretending that everything was under control. "I'm starting to think this isn't just about business for you," she said, stepping closer. "I think she still gets under your skin." Damien's gaze darkened. "This isn't about her." "Then what is it about, Damien?" she asked softly. He stared at her for a moment, as if weighing how much of himself to give away. Then he looked down at the glass in his hand. "It's about not being the fool again. About not being blindsided. About not falling for someone only to have it all ripped away." Juliana's breath caught. "And do you think that's what I'll do?" He met her eyes. Finally. Truly. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I'm scared that if I let go of the lie, I'll want it to be real too much." Juliana stepped even closer. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Then maybe it already is." And for a heartbeat, neither of them could deny it. For the first time since Juliana moved into the penthouse, Damien didn't disappear behind his office door or retreat to his private world of numbers and strategies. That night they stayed in the same room, quiet but present. A movie played softly in the background, untouched plates of takeout growing cold on the coffee table. Juliana curled up on one end of the couch, Damien on the other, both watching the screen but neither really seeing it. Their thoughts tangled between what was real and what was supposed to be pretend. "You used to watch movies as a kid?" Juliana asked suddenly, her voice breaking the silence. Damien glanced at her. "Rarely. My father didn't believe in distractions. He said life wasn't a fantasy, so we shouldn't waste time chasing one." Juliana's smile was soft, sad. "Sounds like he was a joy." He raised an eyebrow. "He wasn't, but I learned how to build an empire from him. I just never learned how to be normal." She looked at him then, not as the billionaire or the man scorned by love, but as someone who had never been taught how to feel safe with another person, and she saw the boy he used to be, the one who was told love was weakness, that softness was failure. "You're not broken, Damien," she said gently. He didn't respond at first, but then he nodded just once. "Neither are you," he said. The space between them felt warmer now, lighter, and when she shifted closer, resting her head against his shoulder, he didn't move away. Instead, he exhaled deeply, like her presence had become something familiar, something he needed. And in that simple moment, filled with silence and honesty, it felt less like a performance and more like home. The next day brought an unexpected challenge in the form of Luca Raymond, an old friend and former flame of Juliana's. He was charming, confident, and entirely too aware of his effect on people. Juliana hadn't seen him in over a year, but when he strolled into the cafe where she was grabbing coffee, it was like no time had passed. "Juliana," he said with a wide grin, "you look incredible." She laughed and hugged him. "Luca." What are you doing here? Just in town for a few meetings. Didn't know I'd bump into the most unforgettable woman in New York. His flirting was easy, casual, but when Damien, who had decided on a rare whim to meet her for coffee, walked in and saw them mid-laugh, something inside him shifted. Juliana saw the change in his expression immediately. "Damien, this is Luca, an old friend," she said quickly. "Luca, my fiancé." Luca extended a hand with a smirk. "You're a lucky man." Damien shook it, but his grip was firm, too firm. "We're both lucky," he said, wrapping his arm around Juliana's waist, his fingers pressed against her lower back like a silent claim. Juliana couldn't help but notice the way Damien stood a little closer, smiled a little tighter. When Luca left, Damien didn't speak right away. "You two seemed close," he finally said. "We were friends, one." Damien narrowed his eyes. "Just friends?" She turned to face him. "Are we seriously doing this? You've kissed me for cameras, held my hand in boardrooms, and now you're jealous?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stared at her like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't want to admit he cared about. "I'm not jealous," he said at last. Juliana smiled knowingly. "Then why are your fists still clenched?" He opened his hands, jaw tight. "Because the thought of you laughing like that with anyone else makes me crazy." And for the first time, Damien realized it wasn't just the world watching Juliana that made him nervous. It was the idea of losing her for real. That night, Juliana couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Damien's words looping in her head. "Because the thought of you laughing like that with anyone else makes me crazy." It wasn't just about the act anymore. She could feel it. Deepening, changing. The lie they started with had grown legs and a heartbeat, and she wasn't sure when the pretending had stopped. Maybe it was the first kiss. Maybe it was the moment he let her see his pain. Maybe it was always meant to become real. She got out of bed and found him in the kitchen, still in his dress shirt, barefoot, nursing a glass of water. "Can't sleep?" he asked softly. "Neither can you," she replied. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, it felt like everything around them paused. Damien set the glass down and leaned against the counter. "Juliana," he began, then hesitated. "I haven't been fair to you." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "This started as a business transaction, but I keep crossing the line. The kiss, the touches, the late-night talks. I told myself I was in control, but I'm not." Juliana's heart pounded. "Damien." "No, let me finish," she said, voice thick with emotion. "I told myself this wasn't real. But every day I spend with you, it becomes harder to lie to myself, to anyone." Her breath caught. Was this it? The moment he'd finally say it? But then his phone buzzed sharply on the counter, shattering the moment. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkened. Celeste. Juliana's chest tightened. Whatever he was about to say dissolved into silence. Another moment stolen. Another almost confession swallowed by the past. And Juliana could feel it slipping, the chance to hear the truth. Before it was too late. The next morning, Juliana woke to an empty apartment. Damien's room was untouched, his phone gone, no note, no message. She tried to tell herself not to worry, but when the front desk called minutes later saying Celeste Moreau was on her way up, every ounce of calm shattered. Juliana barely had time to throw on a robe before the elevator doors opened, revealing Celeste in a white silk pantsuit, heels clicking confidently across the marble floor. Juliana folded her arms. "You're not welcome here." Celeste smirked. "Relax, I didn't come to claw your eyes out. I came to talk, woman to woman." She invited herself in and perched elegantly on the edge of the sofa as if she still belonged there. Juliana remained standing. "I know about your arrangement," Celeste said casually. "The fake engagement, the contract, all of it." Juliana didn't flinch, but inside her stomach sank. "You've got it wrong," Juliana replied coolly. "Do I? Because I happen to know the lawyer who drafted the contract. And I also know Damien doesn't love you. Not like he loved me." Juliana stepped closer. "Then why are you here?" Celeste's smile disappeared. "Because you're ruining his focus, his company. He's distracted, softer, messier. The man I knew would never let a woman unravel him, not unless he was in over his head." Juliana stared at her. And you're scared he's falling for me. Celeste, dude, I'm warning you, for both your sakes. Walk away before he does something he can't come back from. She brushed past Juliana and walked out. Juliana stood frozen, not because of what Celeste said, but because deep down, she feared she was right. Damien wasn't just unraveling, he was falling, and so was she. When Damien returned that evening, Juliana was already seated at the edge of the couch, waiting. The apartment felt charged, quiet, but heavy with unsaid words. She didn't greet him with a smile, didn't pretend everything was fine. Celeste was here today, she said calmly. Damien froze mid-step. What? She knows. About us, about the contract. Damien closed his eyes for a second, jaw clenched. I should have seen this coming. Juliana stood. Why didn't you tell me she was threatening you again? Because I didn't want her poisoning this, he said. Whatever we're building, I wanted to protect it from her. She stepped closer, voice rising with emotion. And what exactly are we building, Damien? Because I don't know if I'm still your pretend fiancé, your emotional bandage, or something you're afraid to name. He moved toward her. I'd never been afraid of anything. Until you. Juliana's breath hitched. I don't know how to be with someone like this, he said, voice low and raw. You matter. That terrifies me. She looked at him for a long time, searching his eyes. Then, be brave. Be clear. I need more than half-truths, Damien. He stepped even closer, now just inches from her. His hands hovered at her waist, unsure. The hesitation was unlike him, so human. I want you, Juliana, he whispered, not the arrangement, not the illusion. You. She swallowed, her heart pounding. Then prove it. He didn't answer with words. He kissed her, slowly, deeply, with no cameras watching, no lie behind it. His truth. When they pulled apart, the silence between them was no longer heavy. It was filled with something real. And for the first time, neither of them wanted to run from it. Damien led her to the bedroom without a word, not out of dominance, not for a show, but because for once, there was no script, no cameras, no performance, just them. The city lights filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bathing the room in a soft glow. Juliana stood in the middle of it, unsure of how to move forward with a man who had been a stranger, a partner, an employer, and now something else entirely. Damien stepped behind her, his hands resting gently on her arms. He didn't pull her, didn't rush her, just waited. If we do this, it changes everything, she whispered. It already has, he murmured against her ear. She turned to face him, her eyes searching his. There was no shield this time, no mask of control, just Damien, raw and vulnerable and wanting. He kissed her again, but this time it was softer, slower. His lips lingered like a question, and when she answered by kissing him back, deeper, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. They moved together with quiet urgency, clothing shed, words unspoken, hearts unraveling. It wasn't passion born of need. It was the quiet revelation of two people finally choosing truth over fear. Hours later, Juliana lay beside him, her head resting against his chest, his arm wrapped securely around her. She had never felt so still inside, so seen, so wanted. This wasn't part of the contract. This was something neither of them had planned for. And as Damien brushed his fingers through her curls, pressing a kiss to her forehead, she knew the line between act and reality had finally disappeared. But just outside that warm, quiet room, the world was still watching, and not everyone wanted their love to survive. The morning after their first night of true intimacy, Juliana woke up to a kiss on her shoulder and Damien quietly murmuring her name. It was the kind of awakening she had once only imagined, peaceful, safe, warm. She smiled, her hand reaching for his, but their perfect morning was short-lived. Damien's phone buzzed nonstop across the room. When he finally reached for it, his relaxed expression stiffened. He sat up quickly, brows furrowed. What is it? Juliana asked, pulling the sheets around her. He didn't answer. He simply turned the screen toward her. Her heart dropped. Every major media outlet had published the same headline. Damien Kingsley's engagement a scam? Contract leak. Juliana grabbed the phone. There it was, scanned pages of their original agreement. Names, signatures, terms. Real. Exposed. Who could have? Celeste, Damien growled. She got to someone. Or hacked something. I knew she was watching too closely. Juliana's chest tightened. So, what now? Now the world knows it started as a lie, he said, standing, anger simmering beneath his calm. My board will panic, investors will feel betrayed, the merger will be threatened, everything we built could fall apart. We? She asked quietly. And Damien turned to her, eyes softer now. Yes. We? Juliana stood too, gathering her strength. Then let's not let her win. We fix this. Together. But as they dressed and prepared to face the media firestorm, Juliana knew this wasn't just about damage control. It was about truth. Because now the world knew the beginning was fake. And they had to prove publicly and painfully that somewhere along the way, the love became real. The press conference was Damien's idea. If we're going to survive this, we can't hide, he told Juliana as they sat across from his PR team. We face them, we tell them everything, on our terms. Julia nodded, but her stomach twisted. She had faced cameras before, but never like this, not as herself, not with her heart exposed. The media gathered in a private ballroom at the Kingsley headquarters. Reporters flashing lights, whispers of scandal riding the tension in the air. Damien wore a charcoal suit, the very image of composed leadership. Juliana stood beside him in a tailored white dress that made her look like a bride, but not the fake kind. Rio, ready. When the microphones turned on, Damien stepped forward. There's been speculation about my engagement to Juliana Carter, he began, voice steady. I won't insult your intelligence by denying what's already out, yes. The relationship began as a business arrangement. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Juliana's hands trembled slightly, but she held her head high. But what started as a calculated decision became something else, something neither of us expected. He reached for Juliana's hand, pulling her gently to the podium. Juliana spoke next, her voice clear, unwavering. I was hired to play a role, but Damien never treated me like a prop. He let me see who he really was behind the suits, behind the walls. And somewhere along the way, I fell for him. No script, no paycheck, just him. The room fell silent. And then someone asked, and Damien, do you love her? He turned to Juliana, looked into her eyes in front of the world and said, yes, I love her, and I'm done pretending I don't. Flashes exploded, reporters shouted questions. But Juliana only saw him. And finally, the truth was louder than the lie. The aftermath of the press conference hit like a tidal wave. By nightfall, every news channel was dissecting their confession. Some called it brave, others called it damage control. Social media erupted, half praising their honesty, half calling it a stunt. The internet had crowned them both liars and lovers. Damien's team scrambled to stabilize investor trust. Juliana, meanwhile, faced a different storm. Calls from casting agents, interview requests, even gossip blog trolls who dug into her past, questioning everything from her acting career to her motives. But the hardest moment came when Juliana's estranged father, who hadn't spoken to her in years, called after seeing her on TV. So, was any of it ever real? He asked. Yes, she whispered. And that's the problem. It's more real than anything I've ever known. Despite the chaos, Damien remained grounded beside her. He shielded her from harsh headlines, made statements on her behalf, even turned down interviews that wanted her alone. They were finally on the same side. But the board of Kingsley Enterprises wasn't convinced. That following week, Damien was called into an emergency closed-door meeting. They want me to step down, he told Juliana afterward, his voice calm but edged with quiet fury. Some of them think I've compromised the company's image beyond repair. Juliana stared at him. What are you going to do? He looked at her for a long time. I'm going to remind them that building a company without a heart is just building a machine. Juliana reached for his hand. And if they still choose the machine, then I walk away with the only thing that ever mattered. Yeah. For the first time, Juliana felt both terrified and free. Because the man who once saw her as a prop now saw her as his entire future. A week passed, the scandal cooled. The headlines faded, and Damien Kingsley didn't step down. Instead, he stood before his board, told the truth again, and reminded them that authenticity was the future of leadership. Some left, others stayed, but most listened, and slowly, things began to settle. The merger surprisingly held. The investor, Charles Delacroix, sent a message to Damien after the press conference: "Love is always a better foundation than fear. You've got my support." Juliana watched Damien rebuild, this time not behind cold glass walls, but with open hands and a clear heart. She stayed by his side, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. They no longer lived in the same rooms like co-stars on a set. They lived like partners, lovers, something dangerously close to forever. One quiet afternoon, Juliana visited her old neighborhood. She walked past the diner where she used to waitress, the theater where she auditioned 100 times without success. None of it felt like failure anymore. It just felt like the road that led her to him. When she returned to the penthouse, Damien was waiting on the balcony, sleeves rolled up, his tie undone, holding a small velvet box in one hand. "You once signed a contract to pretend to be my wife," he said gently. Juliana froze. "But this time, I'm asking without conditions. No timelines, no lies." He opened the box. Inside was a new ring, smaller than the first, but more meaningful than anything she'd ever owned. "Will you marry me?" She smiled, eyes glassy with emotion. "You already know the answer." And when she said yes, it wasn't the end of a performance. It was the beginning of a love that had been real all along. The sun poured golden light over the terrace of a secluded vineyard estate just outside the city. No cameras, no tabloids, no reporters, just a soft breeze, blooming white roses, and 50 hand-picked guests who had seen them through the storm. Juliana stood at the top of the aisle in a satin gown that shimmered like morning light. Her hair was curled softly at the ends, pinned with delicate pearl combs. There was no veil. She wanted nothing to hide her face today. She wanted Damien to see every part of her. No masks, no pretending. As the music began, she caught sight of him waiting at the altar. Damien wore a tailored navy suit, his tie tucked neatly beneath a simple silver boutonniere. But it wasn't the suit that caught her breath. It was his eyes. They were no longer cold or guarded. They were open, clear, filled with awe. When she reached him, he took her hand and whispered low enough only she could hear. "You look like everything I ever needed and never thought I'd deserve." Tears threatened to ruin her makeup, but she smiled. "And you look like home," she whispered back. The ceremony was short, simple, and filled with promises that needed no rehearsal, no grand speeches. Just two people who had found something real in the most unexpected place. A lie that turned into love. When the officiant finally said, "You may now kiss your bride," Damien pulled her close with a laugh of disbelief and joy. The kiss wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. It was real. Messy, breathless, beautiful. And this time, when the guests stood and clapped, Juliana didn't feel like a performer. She felt like someone who had finally taken off the costume and walked into the life she was meant to live. 6 months later, Juliana walked barefoot through the penthouse, sunlight warming the hardwood floors beneath her. The space no longer felt cold or distant. The sleek, modern decor had softened. Photos lined the hallway. A cozy throw hung over the couch, and the faint scent of vanilla and fresh roses drifted in from the open balcony doors. It felt lived in. It felt like theirs. Damien stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, trying and failing to flip a pancake. He turned to her, flour on his cheek and a sheepish grin on his face. "Don't say it," he warned. She laughed, walking up to him and gently wiping the flour from his cheek. You're lucky you're rich, because breakfast is not your talent." He kissed her forehead. "I got you. That's my talent." They ate in pajamas, laughing over burnt pancakes and shared glances that said more than words. They talked about their upcoming trip to Italy, about a nonprofit Juliana was planning to launch to support struggling young actors, and about possibly, maybe someday, starting a family. There was no script now, no staged photos, no more pretending. And yet Juliana often thought back to that first day. The elevator ride, the contract, the fear, the lie. Who would have thought that pretending to love someone could ever lead to a love this real? Later that evening, as they sat together watching the sunset from the balcony, Damien wrapped his arm around her and whispered, "Of all the deals I've ever made, you were the one worth breaking every rule for." She leaned into him, heartful. "And of all the roles I've ever played," she replied, "this was the only one I never want to end." And just like that, the performance became the forever, the lie became the truth, and love wrote its own ending